You have found what lights you up. I'm your host, Sunny the Life Coach, and I'm here because I see you searching for something or someone out there to help you feel better. Something to take away the pain that you're feeling, the inadequacies. I know all of the things that happen in life can leave you feeling empty. Your search is over. This podcast is all about finding your own freedom and power to love yourself enough to shine in the ways you were always meant to, the ways in which you are already fully capable of. If you're ready for some real talk, some serious truth bombs, and a few F-bombs, you are in the right place. Let's do this. Let's get lit. Hey there and welcome. Sending you gratitude and a huge virtual hug for pressing play on this episode today because there's going to be some pretty raw conversation happening here. Because after talking with my friend Leanna about life after child loss last week, I thought the perfect follow-up would be to talk with my friend Lisa Schwartz about trauma. Listen, it is so very necessary to talk about, and we don't discuss it nearly enough, not in the right ways. That's what I've come to realize. Both of those things, that it's necessary and that we also tend to avoid it because it's not always pretty. I want you to know that I truly enjoy beautiful things. I actually do. Focus a lot on the beauty of life, the beauty that is in my life. I also have come to understand and fully embrace that I did not come here to be focused only on the light. The light shines brighter in the shadows. That isn't just a metaphor, it's bigger than that, and I think you may feel that too after listening in today. So acknowledge why you pressed play and honor yourself for doing so. Honor your inner wisdom and your strength. I asked Lisa to have this discussion around trauma with me because I have been hearing more and more on this topic in the land of podcasts, at least the ones that I follow. And one of the concepts that have recently surfaced has been this distinction between traumas, and it's somewhere along the lines of being a human is traumatic. We have all been traumatized in one way or another, all of us. So first, I want you to sit with that and let it sink in. There is more than enough trauma to go around. Think about it. It wasn't that long ago, I think it was the episode about attachment, that I mentioned the trauma of being born. The birthing experience is traumatic for an infant. Now, we don't remember this, but if you think about moving from your warm, safe space into one that is cold and clinical and full of bright lights and loud voices and all of these other noises, that's shocking. It really is. And if you happen to land in the NICU and you weren't able to be held right away, that's a whole nother level. Anyway, I'm not going to get too deep into examples in this intro because Lisa and I are going to give plenty of examples as we talk through this. I just want to set the expectation for you right now that we have all experienced trauma. Being a human is inherently traumatic. So what I've been hearing a lot more lately is that acknowledgement, but it also comes with, well, there's big T trauma and little t trauma. And as if now we need to categorize it. And I dropped this concept in a recent group conversation that Lisa was a part of, and she was pretty quick to correct me on that reference. The impact of trauma on an individual is so very nuanced, and what really matters is how and where we hold it in our bodies. Sharing stories is important. I personally believe that is a crucial component of our healing experience. However, I also believe that we humans can get caught up in that comparison mode of thinking that our traumas aren't quote unquote big enough to be addressed. Someone else has had a far more difficult experience than we have. Or even that someone else has more qualifications on paper to even have the conversations in the first place. Listen, if you are a human being, you've been traumatized, whether you fully remember it or not. Your qualifications include your many years of Earth school. We don't need to try to rate or rank ourselves as to our level of worthiness to even talk about what we have been through. So we're just going to be real with each other today. We are just going to get straight to the heart of the matter as human beings. That is what this is about. We're going to go to some places that might be triggering, and most importantly, we are going to talk about ways that we can heal. We are going to explore our individuality and our uniqueness, and that is what I am here for. So let's get to the business of skimming the surface of a weighty topic. I promise this is amazing. Welcome, my sweet friend Lisa.
Thank you, Sunny.
So grateful to have you here today. What lights you up, my friend?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for asking me. I'm honored, privileged. Yeah, really, really, really honored. What lights me up is helping someone feel better in a very short period of time, where they came in and they were feeling funky or anxious or down or whatever. And then I helped them and they walked out and said, "Thank you, I feel better." Because that has such a ripple effect. Because when they feel better, that extends to other people. That's the ripple. And then that extends to other people.
Yeah.
But just to help someone feel better, even if it's a short amount of time. Yeah.
Jumping right in there with the ripples. I love ripples. Ripples are amazing. We should also, right at the onset of this conversation, address maybe the noises in the background. That is Beanie.
My kitty.
And Beanie is not necessarily a happy kitty at the moment, but or wants some attention. So you know what? We're just going to have this conversation, and this is real and raw, and it is what it is. And if Beanie participates a little bit here and there, that's how it's going to be. It's a beautiful thing. I love it. So thank you. It is an honor and a privilege to have you here. And the reason that I asked you to come and have this conversation with me was because recently I have, and you and I do group calls on almost an almost weekly basis with other friends, of other like minds, and we, just commiserate and have a really good experience. I really appreciate those moments. Somewhere along there, the trauma came up, the word trauma. And that's when I asked you. I will explain a little bit more about why I asked you to have this conversation with me today and how that came up. But first, I want to ask you, what is it exactly that you do? Because you mentioned with what lights you up is that people come to you and then they leave feeling better. What is the work that you do with them to make them feel better or help them feel better?
Good question. Yeah, because as I was telling you that, I was thinking, do I say it now or do I wait? I've been an acupuncturist for almost 22 years.
Fantastic.
I just recently became a certified life coach about a year ago. When I talk about what lights me up, I mean, both light me up, but the acupuncture, that in terms of helping them just physically feel better in a short period of time. I think that that's what I was referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Life coaching, like sometimes, it can take time. But yeah, that's kind of what I was referring to. And just in terms of kind of qualifications, I work in 2 trauma centers. I say emotional trauma because especially when you're talking about acupuncture, if you say trauma, a lot of times people think just injuries. So I
Mm-hmm.
like to preface it by saying emotional trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I work in one that's very geared towards emotional trauma. The other one is also geared towards emotional trauma, but there are a lot more addiction too. I've also worked in rehabs. I've worked in recovery houses, the whole gamut. So I've been doing that for about 7 years.
Okay.
So I've been exposed and been working alongside some, PhDs, master's degrees in the field of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really my experience and my own personal work that I
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
relating to trauma. So I'm not a licensed therapist. I just want to say that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no degrees in that,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I have been around and working with
Mm-hmm.
people that are highly trained.
Yes.
So
And working with people who have emotional trauma and their experiences as well.
right, exactly.
So, excuse me while I clear my throat. I'm still working on getting rid of this cough that I've had for like 10 days. It's ridiculous. So, um, that is wonderful. That is an amazing background, and it helps to transition into having this overall conversation and why we're having it today. Because um, another thing that came up in our bigger picture, like group discussion among friends and like minds, is that um, trauma. Two things came up. One was that I shared within one of our group calls that I had recently been hearing about, like, how to explain trauma. So you just did one version of an explanation, and I know that a lot of times we do kind of tend to think about the people that can help us with traumatic experiences are therapists, emotionally, and absolutely that is true. And there are all of these other supporting areas. I mean, life coaches, that it creeps up into all of our lives. We have our own experiences with trauma. We have exposure to other people who have had experiences with trauma. We have exposure to other professionals, all of those things. So all of this combined is what we are having the conversation about today. All of this is like this collective conversation. It's not like there is a de facto authority on
Right.
this particular, episode. That's not what we're here for. We're here to talk like as two human beings with our experiences and share those in hopefully ways that will help others understand as well. So, one of the things that I said or I shared on a recent call was that I had been hearing from other podcasters and other places lately, for whatever reason, the trauma word kept coming up. And it had been described as capital T trauma and lowercase t, like big T, little t, you know, and that's what I brought up. And the way that it was explained was like, okay, the other part to this is being a human being is traumatic.
Yeah.
We all experience trauma on some level. And so I think what you had said to me at that time was, let's not reduce the experience to big T, little t. It is how it resides in your body.
Right.
And that also goes back to what you said earlier about, okay, I work on emotional trauma, but you're working in an acupuncture center and you've worked in, addiction centers and all of that. And it's like this idea that the mind is one thing and the body is another, that those two things are separate. I think is what we really, I want to get to the core of that in this conversation if we are able to.
Well, let me just go back. I don't work in acupuncture centers. I work in actual emotional trauma centers
Okay, thank you.
where I am one modality that the clients, not all of them, but a lot of them, I'm one modality that is incorporated in their program.
Okay.
So we do a lot of different modalities there. They do a lot of intense therapy,
Mm-hmm.
cognitive thinking, but they also do, there's lots of body therapies, there's somatic therapy,
Yeah.
there's neurofeedback, there's acupuncture, there's yoga, there's massage. There's a whole list of them that I won't go into,
Yeah.
but that's where I work. So I'm not working in an acupuncture center. I'm actually working alongside trauma specialists.
Thank you
Um,
for that clarification. That's really
you're
big. That's
welcome. You're
really
welcome.
big. Yeah.
Yeah, and in both places, and one of the places they happen to just deal with a lot more addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the place that I work at where they have the addiction, I do acupuncture, but I also do coaching there as well. So, so that's incorporated. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. But getting back to what you were talking about when we were talking about the big T, little T, is that what we want to?
Yeah, let's go ahead and dive into that. And again, the way that it was explained was, or the way that I have heard it expressed is, okay, there is the big T trauma, which, people envision that big T includes like the big things like rape and, and just the most difficult things, near death experiences, um, you know, things like that, and they put it in this big T, you know category. And then the little T trauma are just the little thousand cuts that we all get on a daily basis, right? And what you're saying is we don't need to differentiate. Trauma
Mhm,
is trauma,
mhm.
and it depends on how it resides in your body. Can you
Yeah,
expand on that?
yeah. It's that it's it trauma is the event. It's not. Let me explain it this way. Trauma is not the event that happened. It's
Mm-hmm.
what happened to your body, in your body, as a result of the event.
Thank you.
So when there's this talk of big T, little t, what happens is when people haven't experienced what they think is a big T, meaning like you had mentioned, rape
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or war
Mm-hmm.
or some horrific accident, or and many of the big, anything that we can look at and go, wow, that's huge. When they haven't experienced that, it, in a way, a part of them what's the word I'm looking for,
Diminishes.
diminishes, thank you,
Yeah.
diminishes their experience of their
Yes.
own trauma. And then, well, what do I have to be upset about? They went through this horrific thing.
Right.
But really, and I also want to differentiate, there is a huge difference between an event, a single event that happens,
Mm-hmm.
what happens to your body as a result of that single event.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to process that trauma much quicker than when you mentioned like 1,000 cuts, the
Mm-hmm.
childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
neglect,
Mm-hmm.
childhood abuse, things like that, where it was on a daily basis, ongoing, and what your nervous system did to survive that,
To protect you, to
to
protect you from
protect
it.
you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That becomes much harder to treat. Not impossible, much
Mm-hmm.
harder,
Mm-hmm.
because it's been embedded in your nervous system, in your psyche, in your belief system, and how you've navigated the world, fight, flight, or freeze, every moment of every day.
Mm.
Often, and then you get people, and like myself, I've been in and out of therapy, like myself, finally working on it at 53 years old.
Yeah.
So you get people where they, so you can see there's a lot that word, the trauma word, is getting used a lot out there, but I think that it's really important to take a real look at like what it all means.
Yeah.
What is this big T? What is this little T? And I personally don't like it,
Okay.
because I really feel like, people's experience is their experience.
Yes.
It's what happens to their nervous system, their body. Trauma is lodged in the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
because the event happens, you get stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. And, I heard this great thing. I think it was from Peter Levine. It must have been from him. And he said animals are they're fascinating because in the wild, like they'll have a traumatic experience. They just shake it off. They shake it out of the nervous system and move on. They don't hold it. We as humans get stuck and frozen in time. We are stuck in our trauma. We're stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. We don't shake it off.
That is so good. Oh, sorry. I get a visual as you say that of animals, having a traumatic experience and shaking it off, because you can see it, you can witness it. If they are not like injured, but then they will have to recover from their injuries.
Right.
Still, they and shaking it off is a somatic experience.
It is.
That is their natural instinct. Their instinct is to move it through the body and release it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
How about PTSD? Tell me what you think about that. Because and the reason I ask is because I had a conversation with an older gentleman through networking a couple of years ago, locally networking with him, having coffee one morning, and I cannot for the life of me recall how this came up in conversation, but he corrected me when I said something about PTSD, and he said, "Oh no, that's only for soldiers." So I say that because you mentioned war, and that is kind of an association that we make with, okay, PTSD is a result of, a wartime experience and a wartime exposure, that kind of thing, and no one else can have that. And I found it fascinating that he said that. He very, very rapidly corrected me and said, no, only soldiers have PTSD. I said, oh, tell me about that.
Absolutely not. I think that's when it first, that it's not a phrase. It's what is it?
A term, a medical term,
an acronym or something.
Yes, an acronym.
Yeah. And it first came out, I believe, from war, like people that came back from war. However, that is absolutely incorrect.
Yeah.
Post-traumatic stress disorder is, to me, what it means, and I don't know the technical term, but what it means is you have a traumatic experience, it's lodged in your nervous system. The world, outside, people, places, things will trigger it. And your body, because trauma stored in the body, will react. So that can apply to pretty much really anything. Working in the trauma center and the stories and what these people have gone through is truly unbelievable. Like unbelievable that, the human spirit and just how our psyches can split off, not so much personality disorder, not like a completely different person, but just split off and compartmentalize in order for us to survive. But to me, PTSD is when the body just gets physically triggered by some outside source.
Yeah, because it's post-traumatic. Let's talk about what the acronym stands for. Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
So, the disorder means things are out of order, and it can, that doesn't necessarily mean it's like untreatable or that it is an extended thing. It could just be a momentary experience. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, like for me, I was never in war, but when, my boyfriend does something that reminds me of my mother because she traumatized me, I almost, a part of me, that's a protector that protects me, floods my system. And I'm not a completely different person, but I'm not Lisa, the sweet, kind Lisa. I am now in protection mode, and I am now yelling and I'm angry. And that to me is PTSD, because I grew up all these years, even into my adulthood, experiencing this woman who was a PhD psychologist and a narcissist and had personality disorder and depression and drank and did all the things. And, so my whole life was,
Yeah.
traumatized by her. And so when he does something, I'm just going to use him as an example because other people have, but for him, because we live together, when he does something, I am triggered. And that's my post-traumatic stress disorder. It triggers my nervous system and then I react. So that's what it means to me.
I love that. Thank you for using that explanation. Thank you for sharing a level of your experience and being vulnerable in that way. When you are triggered, when your boyfriend triggers you, do you get to the work on trying to change him, or do you explore yourself? How does that work?
I tried to change him for a long, long time because if I could control him and keep him regulated, meaning not triggering me, then I would be okay. But that doesn't work.
Right.
He's got his own trauma and he's got his own triggers and he's got his own thing. And it's up to me to regulate myself. I've done a lot of work on this. However, this is a lifetime of being abused. And it takes a lot of work. And I'm now at the place where I can sense in my body when something doesn't feel right. There's no thinking involved. That's the difference. There's no thought. It's my body tells me. That's when I know, okay, I'm dysregulated right now. And I tell him, look, this is a work in progress, but I let him know I need to stop talking right now. I need to, go in the bedroom. I'm feeling something right now, because if I don't do that, if I don't try to regulate myself, it starts to get bigger and bigger, like,
and then you lash out, you do things,
then
do
I
things or
lash
say
out.
things that you don't necessarily, that later you might regret.
And it triggers his trauma. Then he lashes out. Then I lash out again, and it's a ping pong match.
Yeah.
And so, I think that, I can see, just in my own personal experience and even in these centers that I work at, that there's so many different traumatic experiences, but I did, like, just even going back to what I was saying before, where, someone could, like, get in a horrible car accident. We had this one woman, I don't know if you want me to tell you.
Sure. I mean, as long as we're not divulging any personal information.
This one woman who came to us, who was in a car with 3 other people, and they were drinking, and she was driving and she was drinking, and they crashed, and they were all okay. And her legs got wrapped around some tree or something, and they rushed her to the hospital, and they could not save her legs. And they had to put her into a coma, and they had to amputate her legs. And she was in a coma for a month, and she woke up and had no legs. It gives me chills talking about it, just because of, she was such an incredible person. But, like, that was an example to me of a horrific traumatic thing, like a one-time event.
Yeah.
And not to say it was easy, but that, she doesn't have legs and she's got to deal with all of that, and she's got 2 young kids, but her working through that might not take as long as someone who's been verbally, emotionally abused, sexually abused, physically abused their whole entire life.
Isn't that incredible? I know that is incredible. Yeah. Just verbal abuse. Verbal abuse. Again, going back to that big T, little t thing, reference that, again, I heard from multiple sources, which is why I mentioned it and why I wanted to have this conversation with you today, is that, I would think for some people, this is all subjective, right? It's all subjective.
Absolutely.
For some people might consider a little t trauma, like verbal abuse, a little t trauma. Like, okay, well, you're not physically harmed, but when you hear over and over and over again for years and growing up that you are a piece of shit,
Yeah.
it just absolutely wrecks your
Mm.
psyche.
Yeah.
And then what?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that someone could say, well, you didn't go to war. You weren't
Right.
in war. You didn't have to like kill people. So your trauma isn't as big as
Mm-hmm.
my trauma, or
Yeah.
somebody like that who
Mm-hmm.
was, we could come up with some really intense things, but
I
we'll
ca-
say war.
I call it
Um,
compare. I call it comparing the despair. I mean,
yeah,
why do we need to do that?
yeah,
Why do we
yeah,
even?
exactly. So that's why I don't like that big T, little t
Yeah.
thing. And I believe it's just all about how your body is responding. I wanted to, I don't remember his name because but there's the book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's huge out there. I can't remember his name, but it's very heady.
Mm-hmm.
However, he does. I mean, it's all about how our bodies respond to the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, verbal abuse, neglect.
Mm-hmm.
I was neglected.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, I was by the time I came along, she was done. She didn't even want children.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time I came along, it was like the second my parents got divorced when I was 9, or no, 8, 9, it was like, all right, well, you're on your own. Go find for yourself now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was completely neglected, and I was actually a nuisance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I don't want to get too into it, but it goes even further back.
Yeah.
I also believe in generational trauma,
Yes.
not just what a mother will pass down to her child, but what a mother will pass down to her child on a cellular level, like
Mm-hmm.
while she's carrying that child.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother escaped the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's mother escaped the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 of her sisters came over at different times. The rest of her family died. And then she had my mother and my uncle.
Mm-hmm.
And she never worked on any of that because you don't do that back then. I mean, that just wasn't.
Right.
So can you imagine her
Mm-hmm.
having a child? Like, that's the thing, is like that whole generational trauma, and what gets passed down. And so going back to my point is like, it could be verbal, it could be neglect, it could be attachment disruption, meaning, you know like when I was born, I was put in an incubator. I couldn't be with my mom right away. And
Mm-hmm.
then who even knows what happened? I think she didn't even really want me.
Mm-hmm.
So she wasn't that concerned. And there's a disruption to the attachment, the bonding. So that's traumatic,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like trauma can take on so many different forms, but it's just like I keep going back to, how does our body respond to it? I mean, I shake even now talking about her, because
Mm-hmm.
that is how much it's lodged in my nervous system, how much I'm working on it,
Wow.
But does that diminish it, right? From someone that's been through something, gang raped. Oh,
Right.
that is like unbelievable to me.
Mm-hmm.
But no, to me, all level playing field.
Well, your grandmother, I mean, living through the Holocaust, I mean, that is definitely one of the, in our minds, I think we think like the most horrific experiences
Mm,
imaginable,
yeah.
to live through. Thank you for bringing up generational trauma and being able to pass that through the
Mhm.
cellular level without even
Yes.
um, without even talking about it, without even, uh, acting out on anything. It's just there.
Yeah.
Thank you for opening the door to that. That's something I definitely want to dig into. I don't know if we're going to have time to do it today, but it's definitely something I've been exploring lately. And
Mm,
again, the whole reason that I wanted to have this conversation. Also, when you talked about the trauma center that you work in, you mentioned yoga. And I
mm,
recently had a conversation with author Lauren Duke. And, her childhood was absolute shit. I mean, the title of her book is Shithouse.
yeah.
And how she ended up approaching her trauma and healing. And this is probably a lifelong practice I don't
Yeah.
know that there is a finish line to this healing experience, even as you're talking about, the fact that you still have a visceral reaction to thinking thoughts of your mother. Um, with Lauren, I mean, she primarily did it through yoga, and so I think that it is. I love, love, love that the center that you work in, and in the humans that you work with have access to all different things, because I think that also plays into the whole concept of we are all unique. Each one of us are unique. We are bio individuals. We are, and our experiences and our ancestral traumas and all the things that have been passed down are a complete unique thing.
Yeah.
So to categorize it, you know, I I remember when we had that conversation again in the group, and I brought up the big T little T, and you pretty swiftly corrected me on that, which is great. It's great. I don't remember feeling sorry for saying it. I remember thinking in the moment, then I want to have a talk with you
Yeah.
so you can really shine a light
Mhm.
on what this really is from a human perspective, from your experience as a human, and as a human who helps other humans,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah, because I'm in that world, and I'm also working with people that are, really good at what they do. And so I'm exposed to so much that most people aren't exposed to. And, it's interesting too. I talk to lots of people about where I work and what I do and talk about trauma. And I find often people like, wow, I'm starting to think about the way my mom treated me. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't even occur to them. I'm having a conversation with someone right now where she thought, well, that's just the way parents treat you.
Yeah.
And yet what it did to her, emotionally and physically, she just thought, well, that's just the way it was. And so now it's not even so much of, creating stories in your head of things that didn't happen, but it's about, you know, bringing light to, yeah, that was traumatic. And
Mhm.
that, what did that do to your nervous system, to your psyche, to your belief system? So that's why I think it's important to talk with people that are in that world or are, experts in that world.
Mhm.
Um, I was gonna say that because we were talking about the yoga, because in the book he brings that up too. He brings that up as a modality of heal, a really great modality to heal
Mhm.
trauma. And
Mhm.
it's probably because in trauma, when you're traumatized, you really don't want to be in your body. It's not
Mhm.
safe to be in your body. People are like, well, what does that even mean? We dissociate all the time. Dissociation means just, here's a great example. You're at your house and you get to the grocery store and you don't even remember.
Yeah.
You don't even remember anything. You dissociated. That's just a minor dissociation.
Mhm.
Bigger dissociations when, you have something trauma triggered and you kind of just separate from yourself in a way. You still have co-consciousness, you're still there,
Mhm.
but you're just separate. You're not embodied. You're not feeling it because it's not safe.
Mhm.
So he talks about yoga being one thing that can actually help you. And I want to preface it by saying being doing yoga with someone or a group where they are somewhat trauma informed, because yoga positions can be very triggering too.
Yes.
So that's really important.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say was that, I think, therapy is so important
Mhm.
when a safe therapist, someone, that feels safe, to talk to about these things. It's one piece of it though, because
Yeah.
you can tell the story over and over and over. And what happens every time you tell the story, your brain, it's like that neural pathway continues to get fired
Mhm.
up. So you
Mhm.
tell the story, it fires up the neural pathway. So it keeps you sort of stuck in a way.
Mhm.
And the modalities, the physical body modalities, are a great component when you're working on trauma, like in a trauma center or even your own personal trauma, to do these other modalities to work on that physical level,
Mm-hmm.
to try to, so you're not just sitting there talking about the same thing over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
It's about working on the body, doing the body work.
I appreciate that you said embodied. And, I also call it kind of, or I refer to it, in my, my just layman's terms, if you will, is like reconnecting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do feel, or I have come only recently come to realize that I have completely disconnected.
Yeah.
And when you focus, like from our coaching experience has been very focused on mindset, and the mind and the mind's role and everything,
Mm-hmm.
which is wonderful. But as you said, it is one component. And I remember there was a period of time during our training where we talked about, or either it was either during the training or something off to the side that said, okay, where do you feel it? Like sometimes we have trouble even naming an emotion. Like intellectually, we're like, I don't know the name for what I'm feeling right now. I'm like, well, where is it in your body?
Yeah.
Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it swirly? Is it stagnant? Is it, all those things? And I remember going through that process and going, I don't feel a damn
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
I feel nothing.
Yeah.
I don't feel, what do you mean? Where is it in my body?
Yeah.
What does that mean? So that takes work in itself. And when I do, there definitely have been, thank you for mentioning the yoga poses, because there have been poses where I, find myself all of a sudden bursting into tears. And I'm like, what just happened? What just happened? But this is an ancient system. It is not like, and it is a health system. We use it in Western society primarily for like physical health, but it is a spiritual practice. And, you know, all of it is it's intended to keep, keep us in an embodied state, have us connected to ourselves, have us understand and create a relationship with our bodies where we feel safe. And I'm just talking like this is just like a download coming to me right now. I'm just talking.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is my experience. This is what I think
Yeah.
in the moment about the things I'm saying out loud are like, okay, these are the things I need to be doing,
Yeah. Yeah. And I know
more
it.
often.
Yeah. 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 I think that sometimes, yeah, we're just have a conversation, and all of a sudden something comes to us that we were, I guess, ready for, open to. It's the
Hmm.
same thing with modalities. It's the same thing with the yoga where you're crying. Well, some little crack, something opened up,
Right.
in that moment. I've heard that a lot. I've had a lot of experience, especially doing acupuncture on people,
Mm,
where I've had people that'll start crying right away. I've had people where they have some weird physical thing and they can't even explain it. They're like, I was never injured there. I don't understand. To me, it's trauma somewhere. Something happened and it kind of lodged itself there on a physical level. I
hmm.
had this one guy who couldn't feel his face. I mean, you can't necessarily always feel your face unless you're touching it, but
Hmm.
it was almost like he was so disconnected from his face. And I said to him, well, how would you feel? Would you be open to me putting some needles on your face and just seeing what happens? Like and granted, he's in a trauma center. So he's got his therapist, he's got his team.
Hmm.
Very different than being out there in the world and you don't have a support system and something opens up that you're
Hmm.
not prepared for or don't have support around, and left to your own devices to try to deal with it. So he's in this trauma center and he said, yeah, sure, why not? And so we did. He had a memory come up of something he had pushed down so far that in all his therapy sessions it never come up, and the acupuncture needles brought it out.
Mm. Brought the
So
memory.
brought
Mm.
the memory up.
Hmm.
So yeah, just in talking about how important it is to do the physical stuff, not just the talking,
Yeah.
and living it. And here's another thing too. People think they have to remember their trauma in order to heal it. That is absolutely not true.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. Tell me about that.
Mhm. Because some people that come to the center, and by the way, one of the places I work at is called Reconnect.
Oh, what?
Right?
How
Okay.
I just got chills. Woo,
Uh-huh. I know.
love it.
So the owner, she says, because we had talked about that, because a lot of people think, well, I think I might have been molested, but I can't remember anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe that they just completely blocked it out and
Mm-hmm.
they're just not even able. They're that part of them will not go there.
Mm-hmm.
Just won't allow them to go there. It's too painful.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't force themselves. So how do they heal? Like
Mm-hmm.
if it happened, sometimes we get clients that think something happened, but they
Right.
don't remember and it didn't really happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they think, but I have to be able to remember it. I have to remember it. But what if there's a part of your psyche that won't let you remember it? How do you heal from it?
Right.
You do, there's a lot of different modalities. There's gosh, I could list all the stuff. There's brain spotting, there's EMDR, there's ways to get the brain to get activated with different modalities, and you can work on it just by how you somatically feel.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have like a visual memory of it in order to heal from it. Because
Mm.
I do think that a lot of people get very hung up on that. If I can't remember, I can't heal. I have to remember.
Yeah, because you have to talk it through. You have to talk
Right.
about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is what happened, and this is what happened, and this is what happened. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not necessarily true. There are so many ways to heal from trauma
Mm.
don't involve the visual memory of it. I do not remember my childhood at all.
Okay.
So, of course, you know, I was thinking like, wow, what happened? But it could have just been just a matter of a part of me said, we're shut down. That's it. We're done. You
Yeah.
know, those little traumatized Lisas are like, we're going over here in the corner,
Mm-hmm.
not remembering anything. Because I kept thinking, well, maybe something really bad happened. Like I
Yeah.
was molested, or I don't believe that. I think it's just, the more people I talk to about this, the more people start telling me, I don't remember my childhood either.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but I've got to remember it to heal, or I've got to remember if I think I was molested, I've got to remember. And no, that came up for me. I just wanted to clarify that, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I'm so grateful that you brought that up. Now, one thing that I do want to ask you, I feel like we could go on for hours, and I know that you are limited in time today. So I just want to be sure that I ask this, and who knows, we can maybe continue this conversation at another time, because there's so many different ways. As you said, there are so many different modalities. But there are also, I'm hearing ancestral trauma, I'm hearing inner child work, I'm hearing like shadow work, I'm hearing all of these things. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many, it's a huge conversation. We're just going to skim the surface today. But I think that most of us do think of when we are healing trauma, we do think, and again, I'm so appreciative that you have access to all of these modalities and all of these experiences. I think that the majority of us think of therapy,
Yeah.
of talk therapy, of cognitive therapy, and that's been mentioned a few times in a few different ways here. Where would you recommend, if someone wants to start
Yeah.
down this path? Do you start with talk therapy, and how do you find a good therapist? Because I have had some
Mm.
experiences with therapists that have been less than pleasant. So how does one where does one start with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I personally feel like someone should start with therapy
Okay.
before going in investigating all of these other modalities.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many now that there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't available years ago.
You're right.
Because years ago they didn't know. They thought, well, you just talk it out. You just keep talking. Now they're realizing, oh, this is keeping people stuck in these loops. But starting off with therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and then once there is a relationship with a therapist, once you start to develop a little bit more, grounding isn't the word, resourcing
Mm-hmm.
within yourself, meaning because some people think, well, how do I know if I need therapy? I've been thinking about it. I think it's when, I know I'm kind of going off on a little tangent, I'll get back to that, but when someone is maybe repeating the same patterns over and over, you can't understand why, or they're getting very triggered by something that is, I'm not going to say not a big deal, but maybe their boss sends them an email, and every single time they see that name, the anxiety just completely takes over their system, and they're like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? Things like that, where you're noticing something's going on with me. Like, I'm not quite sure. Or yeah, I think that it's sometimes it's hard to know, do I need therapy? Do I not? But let's just say you're like, okay, well, you know what? I'll explore this. I would start with therapy and then take it from there.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, okay, once you feel somewhat resourced in yourself and you have this person that you can talk to, then you start to explore the other modalities.
What does resourced in yourself mean?
Meaning, can you regulate yourself? Like, if you get very activated, and maybe you're like bawling your eyes out from, whatever, and then you fall into a deep depression, and then you can't get out of bed and go to work, that kind of a thing, where you're able to learn. There's so many different ways. There's so many different, it's not even so much modalities, but I guess that's the right word, where you learn how to maybe do some mindfulness techniques, or you learn how to do, there's tapping techniques, or there's ways to kind of regulate yourself so you don't get like heightened depression or anxiety, and you're not able to function. I mean, I know that gets, because you talked about, like, we could have so many different conversations,
so many layers upon layers
here. We talked about so many things, but I want to get back to you, like, how do you find a qualified therapist, right? I've had ones that were not good. There are a lot of therapists that will project their own stuff onto their clients, and it could be a really unhealthy relationship. Either by asking other people around you for a referral, that would be, maybe one thing. Or, maybe if you know somebody that says, you know what, my therapist is great, maybe that therapist can refer people. People can go on to Psychology Today, and look people up. It's a tricky one. Well, because unless you know, you know what I'm saying? Unless like, for me, if you were to come to me, I know a lot of great therapists.
Yeah.
But how does the average person,
right,
like, people don't have access?
Well, I think what I'm getting at here is to maybe, I think the message that I want to ensure that our listeners have with this particular area is, if you have never seen a therapist before, or if you have even if you have and you have not had the greatest experience with a therapist before, is that when it is forming a new relationship, and it is an intimate relationship. And so if you're not connecting with that person, it's okay to move on and try another one and another one. It's not like you have to take the first recommendation. It's not like you have to, it's almost like you're interviewing them for, like, to be your confidant, your partner in this work. So I would personally recommend, for what it's worth, and my grandmother was a therapist, and this is what she told me. Okay, she told me to shop around. I mean, that kind of thing. So when I was in my 20s, she told me that. So that has been my experience, that I'm not always connecting with the first therapist that I come across, and that I do have to do that sometimes. But when if that is working, and if it's not working, you're not connected with that person, right? Your relationship doesn't feel like it should. I'm trust it, it's almost, how am I trying to describe it? It's almost like trying to find a way to trust yourself even when you're going through something that you're trying to find the trust in yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it sounds like what you're saying is try to trust. We're never taught how to tap into our gut feeling and
Yes.
what, and because of that, we're so unsure
Mm-hmm.
um, what that even feels like, what that is. I do think that it is important to get at least a sense of, is this person listening to me?
Mm-hmm.
Is this person um, holding space for me?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, not trying to tell me what to do or interrupting me or things like that. But what I do want to go back to is, if this one doesn't work, then try another one and try another one and try another one. And that actually could be a part of us that is scared to get help, is scared to trust. And so we'll
Mm-hmm.
find any little thing, because I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that. I've gone through many therapists. Now, it's sometimes, if you, like you said, if you've never been in therapy before, sometimes you don't even know. You have
Yeah.
no clue what you're looking for, what you need, what feels right.
Yeah.
But I would say, if you know nothing, do you feel this person is sitting in front of you and really present and really listening?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that would be just number one.
Yeah.
Number one. Because
Yeah.
I've hopped around too, and I've realized that there was parts of me that were just too scared,
Mm-hmm.
too afraid. So I would just nitpick.
Mm-hmm.
I nitpicked. I was like, oh, you know what? You said that next, or you did that next. And I'll say though, that sometimes is the best work you're ever going to do. Is like
Mm-hmm.
when you're feeling something, I feel like you're not listening to me right now. I feel like you're off somewhere else. Like, it's not easy for people to say that,
Yeah.
but that would be like the best work, because you're doing this with your therapist, and this is
Yeah.
the you know take
Yeah.
on the world. But that, I'm not saying that that's an easy thing to do, but
No, it's not, but that would definitely open up some doors and some opportunities for
yeah,
again, there that vulnerability and that, ooh, let's see where that goes.
right.
If I say this, oh my gosh.
Yeah, let's see
There's
how the therapist reacts to that. If they get defensive, then absolutely
yeah.
not the right one for you. No,
Yeah. Yeah, so good.
no way.
So good. And I've done that. I've done a little hopping around, but I've also I've also been triggered and just gotten so pissed off that I'm like, screw
Yeah,
all therapists. I'm done,
yeah,
So there's that too. It's like, okay, don't I guess the message is like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't give up on all therapists because you've had a couple of bad experiences. If you have, if that has been your case, because
absolutely.
I did find one recently. I'm not seeing her now, but I saw her for a couple of years, and I just adored her, absolutely adored her. She and I clicked like pretty quickly. So, it's possible. It is possible.
It really is. And it's process, and
Yeah.
it takes time. And um, yeah, I just go back to that thinking, that question, just like, how do people know they have trauma, or how, I think everybody's got some level of it. But,
Yeah.
how do they know if they need to be, in therapy? Like, that's just, yeah, I think it's just goes back to just was doing, like when I was really young, and now
Mm,
I'm in my, late 40s doing the same thing. And I was like, okay,
yeah.
this is definitely, there's something there for sure. Like, it's time to really work on this. And then I did a little bit, and then I had to walk away, because that happens too, right? Where it's like, okay, I need to somehow process all this. I need to live in the world still. I
Hmm.
need a break. But, and then the other thing too is that the whole point of therapy is to really heal and then move on, and it doesn't mean you don't check in, but um
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I, I think there's just, it's so across the board. I mean, I've seen people in therapy for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen other people in therapy for, 6 months. It's like, it just totally depends.
Again, back
Right?
to that bio individuality, back to
Yeah,
every experience is unique, every
yeah,
human is unique. Every strand of DNA is,
right.
specifically yours. So
Yeah,
there's no blanket answer. And there is no categorization. There will be no more categorization coming from me of big T, little t. That is for sure. And what
yeah,
I will say is that the I do, and I'll ask if you agree with this, the statement from another one of our friends that simply being human is traumatic.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we just it just and just own and admit that. I'm glad we're having these conversations. That is the thing that I'm hearing it more and more. And you mentioned that too. Everyone's talking about trauma now. Well, good. It's
Mhm.
about damn time.
It's exactly. And
Mhm.
that's why I've been talking about my mom more and more and more.
Yeah.
This is what I need to go through. My mother starved herself to death.
Mm, mm,
So what is really fascinating is here's a PhD psychologist, PhD
yeah.
psychologist
Yeah.
who's, comes from a line of Holocaust survivors, and the way that she takes herself out because she never dealt with her trauma was to
Hmm.
starve herself to death.
Wow.
That is really traumatic. So it's like dealing with all of my childhood trauma with her. And then I haven't even touched that piece.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not quite sure where I was going with that, but where I'm talking about it more. I'm talking about my mother more, and I'm
Yeah.
talking, and it's opening up doors for other people to go, wait a minute, my mom did this. It's not to vilify, it's not to, you know, to get people to think bad things. I'm just sharing my story
Right.
because, I've kept it locked away for so long because it's so painful. And I
Hmm.
haven't wanted to deal with it. And now I'm like, I'm 54. It's time because I will not leave this earth like how
Yeah.
she left this earth.
Yeah.
I will break the cycle. I do not have my own children, but I will break the cycle of trauma in
Hmm.
me. I would, this book has, I mean, I'm not like plugging books, but I'm not a huge book person either. But this book has changed my life. It's called
Mother
Mother
hunger.
Hunger.
Okay.
I, and I've been like in and out of therapy many years. I have
Mhm.
never ever heard anybody articulate my experience as a, growing up, and my experience as a human being and the way that I navigate through the world like she has.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
she'll say something and I'm like, that's me. Oh my God, that's what I do. And she explains why.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, now it all makes sense. Now it all makes sense. And so for me, it's this sharing this book, sharing about my experience, trying to help others tap into that. Like what you were
Yeah.
saying, but talking about it,
Yeah.
we just talk about it and we
Yeah.
help each other heal. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Even if it's just even if it's an offhanded conversation over
Yeah.
coffee through networking, whatever. I mean, it's like, wait a minute. Let's discuss what we really think this means.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this conversation today. I really value
Mm,
everything that you have to bring always.
thank
I do.
you. Thank you, Sunny. I really feel honored,
Mm,
truly honored that you would ask me to
yeah.
do this because I know that you are not going to ask just anybody
Yeah.
to be on your podcast and talk about certain things. This is your baby and it's really important to you. And it just, yeah. Um, I can't thank you enough.
Mm, you
I
were
mean,
perfect.
really, this is just
Yeah.
I was also like, I don't know what to say. And
Yeah.
it's not like I don't know what I'm talking about. I feel really, but I thought, well, you know, maybe a therapist should be on here. And like, I
Yeah.
don't know. But now that we've done it, it was just Amazing.
It's exactly what it was supposed to be. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
lovely. Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you.
I will talk to you soon, my friend.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what more needs to be said, to be honest. For me, it seems that I kept most of what I had to say in the intro to prep you for what we were going to say, but not too much. I want you to acknowledge that a part of you was nudged to listen to this. I want you to recognize and honor that part of you and start getting to the business of believing that there are no accidents. It was no accident that I shared one day in a conversation, oh, I've been hearing big T, little t as a way to describe our experiences with trauma. And Lisa immediately jumped in and said, no, trauma is trauma. Why the hell are we categorizing it? Fair fucking question. And I got a hit in that moment to follow up with her. Something inside me was called to offer a place where the two of us could really just break down what we know as two fallible humans who, again, have been studying in Earth School for, well, half of our lives now, hopefully. Does that not count for something? Does that not make us authorities on some level? Do we have to have specific papers and stamps of approval from whatever authorities out there that tell us it's okay to talk about these things? And by the way, who originally decided who those powers would be? That we can talk about things and share our experiences, that we are qualified to do that. Let's just get real with one another. That's all I've ever been after. We are just skimming the surface of what we are truly capable of. Every single one of us is capable of having a conversation. If you take nothing else away from this episode, please acknowledge that much. Yes, seek therapy. And if you have access to a center like Lisa is describing where she works, that is wonderful. Yet so many of us don't. So let's just start with talking and being open. Not in a way that means this defines us, in a way that heals us. The last thing I want to say is that the other book that Lisa mentioned besides The Body Keeps the Score was Mother Hunger by Kelly McDaniel. I wanted to make sure that I followed up with that because I recognized that we both spoke the title at the same time, so it came out garbled. That's because Lisa was actually holding the book up for me on camera and I was reading the title out loud because it was just my instinct to do that, and you probably didn't catch it. So Mother Hunger is the book title, and it is what has helped Lisa. I trust her recommendations. I think I'm probably going to check it out because mother wounds and all of the things are actually a lot to unpack. That alone can take a freaking lifetime. I am also taking one-on-one clients at this time. So if you want to connect, you can message me on either Facebook or Instagram at Sunny the Life Coach, or email me at sunnythelifecoach@gmail.com. Sit with all of this. Everything that we have said here today came from our hearts and our souls. Please reach out if you would like to have a conversation because it is my favorite thing in the world to do. I'm going to stop talking and just allow you to reflect, to light up and shine on.